Okay, if you'd like, turn to John chapter 19. Then Pilate, therefore, took Yeshua and scourged him. And the soldiers platted a crown of thorns and put on his head, and they put on him a purple robe, and said, Hail, King of the Jews! They smote him with their hands. Pilate therefore went forth again, and said unto them, Behold, I bring him forth to you, that you may know that I find no fault in him. Then came Yeshua forth, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. And Pilate said unto them, Behold the man. And when the chief priests therefore and officers saw him, they cried out, saying, Kill him, kill him. Put him on the stake. A lot of versions says crucify, but if you look up the word crucify, it is not the cross, it's a stake. Pilate said unto them, Take you him and kill him, for I find no fault in him. The Jews answered him, We have a law, and by our law he ought to die, because he made himself the son of Elohim. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he was more afraid, and went again into the judgment hall, and said unto Yeshua, Whence art thou? But Yeshua gave him no answer. Then said Pilate unto him, Speakest thou not unto me? Knowest thou not that I have power to put you on the stake, and have power to release thee? Yeshua answered, Thou could have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above. Therefore he that delivered me unto thee has the greater sin. And from thenceforth Pilate sought to release him. But the Jews cried out, saying, If thou let this man go, thou art no Caesar's friend. Whosoever makes himself a king speaks against Caesar. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he brought Yeshua forth and sat down in the judgment seat in a place that is called the Pavement, but in Hebrew, Gabbatha. And it was the preparation of the Passover, about the 6th hour. And he said unto the Jews, Behold your king. They cried out, Away with him, kill him. Pilate said unto them, Shall I crucify, put him on the stake, your king? The chief priests answered, We have no king but Caesar. Then delivered he him therefore unto them to be killed. And they took Yeshua and led him away. In our text, we encounter a tremendous moral struggle. The man experiencing this struggle is the governor of Judea, Pontius Pilate. His struggle begins when providence brings him face to face with our Lord Yeshua Messiah. His encounter with Yeshua is an encounter with truth, and truth always demands a response. But I want to examine the elements of his struggle, and by doing that, learn how to successfully deal with our own struggles. First, the verdict of Pilate's own conscience is loud and clear. Over and over, we hear him saying concerning Yeshua, I find no fault in this man. Pilate knows that Yeshua is innocent of the charges that have been brought against him. He even knows why these religious leaders have trumped up these charges against Yeshua. In Matthew 27:18, it's for he knew that for envy they had delivered him. Pilate cannot claim ignorance concerning Yeshua's guilt. He personally interrogated him several times. Each interrogation further confirmed Yeshua's innocence. Pilate's conscience is also telling him that there is something very unusual about Yeshua. He has sat in judgment over hundreds of men. He knows how people respond when facing with a death sentence. He expects to see either a trembling soul pleading for mercy and begging for his life, or a hardened criminal trying to lie or bribe his way out of trouble. At one point, he is so flabbergasted by Yeshua's demeanor that he says unto him, in John 19, verse 10, Then says Pilate unto him, Speakest thou not unto me? Knowest thou not that I have power to crucify or put you on a stake, and have power to release you? Now remember the word, crucify is number 4717. Starul. Starul is a stake. Drive down stakes to fortify with driven stakes, and it's used in the word crucify. He wasn't on a cross. He was on a stake. Every answer Yeshua gave Pilate brought more and more truth to bear on his conscience. Yeshua answered those questions by talking about the real source of authority, which is Yahweh, not Caesar. Yeshua had talked to Pilate about the nature of his kingdom, a kingdom not from this world, but from heaven above. He talked with him about two kinds of people, those on the side of truth and those in opposition to truth. We experience that today. You see that on the news all the time. This is the world we live in. Pilate progressively realizes that there is something highly unusual about Yeshua. In John 19:7, the Jews finally tell Pilate the real reason they want Yeshua to be put to death. Up until that time, they had tried to frame their accusations in a way that would win Pilate's agreement with them against Yeshua. But in the heat of the moment, the truth spills out. We have a law, and according to our law, he must die. Now here comes the zinger. Because he claimed to be the son of Elohim. With everything Pilate had observed about Yeshua and everything his conscience was screaming to him, those words were terrifying to him. Pilate was not a Jew. In fact, he despised the Jews. He did not embrace their religious beliefs, but as a Roman, he had religious beliefs of his own. And it was very common for Romans to believe in demigods, like Hercules and other mythology. Maybe this Yeshua really is a supernatural being. His demeanor certainly indicates something very unusual. John tells us in verse 8, when Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid. In addition to all this, Yahweh gives Pilate's wife a dream. We don't know exactly what she saw in the dream, but we do know that Yahweh sent it as a supernatural warning to Pilate and his wife. Matthew 27, verse 19. When he was set down on the judgment seat, his wife sent unto him, saying, Have thou nothing to do with that just man, for I have suffered many things this day in a dream because of him. There's Pilate struggling with his own conscience. Everything within him is saying Yeshua is innocent. There's obviously something unusual about Yeshua that may very well be supernatural. And then comes this message from his wife. Don't have anything to do with this innocent man. You see the grace of Yahweh in all this? A man's conscience is telling him to do the right thing to do, and then Yahweh mercifully sends a supernatural dream to warn him even further. Pilate knows what is right. He has the authority by his own confession to do the right thing. But here's the problem. The voices of the crowd is in conflict with the conscience, and he wants to please the crowd. Pilate has a lot to lose here. He is in a position of power and advantage. He is respected. His wife enjoys the palace. He makes good money and has a great future. The problem is, if he follows his conscience, he may lose all of it. He's already been reprimanded by Rome for mishandling previous events. He does not need to have more complaints sent in from local authorities. Yes, he's in charge, but Caesar's approach to government is to pacify the locals as much as possible and keep collecting their taxes. If you can't handle that, they will find someone who can. Think about our situation in Iraq, especially before the sovereignty was handed over to the new Iraqi government. We have the military might and the authority to control the region. But if we are insensitive to the religious customs of the people, we could find ourselves facing an impossible situation. We want leaders there who will take charge, but do not needlessly alienate people. And that was also what Rome wanted. The Jewish leaders know Pilate's vulnerability and play it to the hilt. When Pilate tried to set Yeshua free, the Jews kept shouting, "If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar." That hit Pilate's struggle dead center. The right thing to do was to set Yeshua free, but was he willing to pay the price to do the right thing? Pilate did what we were often tempted to do in a situation like this. He tried to avoid the decision as much as he could. First, when the Jews brought Yeshua to him, he tried to hand him back to them. In John 18:31, then said Pilate unto them, "Take you him, and judge him according to your law." The Jews therefore said unto him, "It is not lawful for us to put any man to death." That didn't work because they were insisting on the death penalty, which the Jews could not execute without Roman approval. The Jewish leaders forced Pilate's hand by saying that Yeshua had claimed to be a king. A Roman governor could not ignore that kind of claim without getting into trouble with his superiors. If he ignored it, and then Yeshua did lead a rebellion, he would be accountable for not dealing with it. Second, Pilate's second attempt to avoid a decision happened when he heard that Yeshua was from Galilee. Luke 23:7 says, "And as soon as he knew that he belonged unto Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who himself was also at Jerusalem at the time." Luke 23:7 tells us that Galilee was under Herod's jurisdiction. And so Pilate sent Yeshua to Herod, who was in Jerusalem. We know from Luke's account that Herod was glad to see Yeshua because he wanted Yeshua to work a miracle for him, put on a show. But instead, Yeshua wouldn't even answer Herod's questions. Herod's soldiers abused and mocked Yeshua and sent him back to Pilate. And third, we have Pilate then had a stroke of genius. He remembered a custom observed during the Passover in which the Roman governor would let the people choose one prisoner to be released. Pilate saw this as a solution to his problem. He would narrow the choice between Yeshua and a scoundrel named Barabbas. Barabbas was such a low life, he was sure they would not choose him. But the Jewish leaders were determined to have Yeshua killed. And they led the crowd in asking for Barabbas instead of Yeshua. Pilate's moral dilemma just would not go away. It was during this effort that he learned about his wife's dream. And fourth, I wondered if Pilate wanted to do this, but he figured it was better than putting Yeshua to death. He ordered his soldiers to flog Yeshua. Historians tell us that the whips used by the Romans had pieces of metal and bones tied to each thong. These whippings were so brutal that some died from the flogging alone. John tells us that the soldiers mocked Yeshua and repeatedly slapped him on the face with their hands. They put a purple robe on him and to ridicule him as king and a crown of thorns on his head. In that pitiful condition, Pilate brought Yeshua before the crowd, confident that they would be satisfied with the punishment and consent to Yeshua's release. But that didn't work either. They continued to demand that Yeshua be put to death. During this whole ordeal, Pilate tries over and over again to reason with the mob and to get them to let Yeshua go. But every effort put the decision right back on his lap. Would he or would he not authorize the killing of Yeshua? The vacillation of Pilate's will accumulates in the wrong decision. Finally, Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified. John 19:6, when the chief priests, therefore, and officers saw him, they cried out, saying, "Crucify him, put him on the stake. Put him on the stake. Take you him and crucify, or put him on a stake, for I find no fault in him," he says. In addition to trying to avoid making the decision he ultimately had to make, Pilate also did a couple of things to try to appease his conscience. During the latter stages of this process, he took a bowl of water and washed his hands before the crowd and said to them, "I am innocent of this man's blood. It is your responsibility." Matthew 27:24, you remember the chilling answer the crowd gave to that particular statement. Verse 25, then answered all the people and said, "His blood be on us and on our children." There is a significant contrast between Pilate and the religious rulers of Jerusalem. Yeshua addressed the contrast in John 19, verse 11, when he said to Pilate, "Thou couldst have no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above. Therefore he that delivered me unto thee has the greater sin." Most scholars conclude that Yeshua is referring to the high priest, Caiaphas. It's doubtful that Pilate knew anything about Judas. He would have probably understood Yeshua to be talking about the religious ruler of the Jews who had brought Yeshua to him. And notice that Yeshua does indicate degrees of guilt in his statement. There is good evidence that there will be degrees for when the books are opened on Judgment Day. And Revelation 20:13 tells us that each will be judged according to what he had done. Revelation 20:13, and the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them, and they were judged every man according to their works. Caiaphas and other Jewish rulers had sinned more than Pilate had. They had the scriptures and were the spiritual leaders. But they also were far more set in their opposition to Yeshua than Pilate was. Today there are people like Caiaphas who are all out against Yeshua. They have had great opportunity to know the truth. But instead of loving the truth, they have set themselves in opposition to it. They have the greater condemnation. But what about Pilate's compromise? Caiaphas may have the greater guilt, but Pilate is nonetheless guilty. He violated his own conscience. He even did it in spite of the warning that Yahweh sent in the dream of his wife had. In 1 Timothy 6:13, Paul reminded Timothy that Yeshua witnessed a good confession before Pilate. 1 Timothy 6:13 says, "I give thee charge in the sight of Yahweh, who quickens all things, and before Messiah Yeshua, who before Pontius Pilate witnessed a good confession." Pilate had every opportunity to make the right choice, but simply decided to protect his own position rather than do the right thing. By washing his hands before the crowd, he was sending a message to the Jewish crowd. In fact, the ritual was not a Roman ceremony, but a Jewish one. According to Deuteronomy 21, 6-9, this is what the elders were to do in the case of an unsolved murder. They were to publicly declare their innocence in that way. They were to publicly, but the ritual itself that they were declaring, the ritual itself was not the whole story. The ritual was an outward declaration of what was already true. They were innocent, and this was their statement of the fact. But Pilate was not innocent of the blood of Yeshua. He not only flogged an innocent man, but he authorized his death. The ritual alone would not change that fact. Even today we have people try to use religious rituals the way Pilate did. People who have never surrendered their lives to Messiah go through water baptism thinking that ceremony will by itself give them a right standing before Yahweh. But water baptism is to be the answer of a good conscience towards Yahweh through the resurrection of Yeshua Messiah. Water baptism is indeed a valid declaration of the work of Yahweh in a person's heart, but just doing a ritual without the spiritual reality is not sufficient. Even though Pilate's ritual came from the Bible, it did not remove his guilt. Pilate did one other thing to appease his conscience. He had a sign fastened to Yeshua's stake which said, "Yeshua of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." John 19, verse 21 and 22 says, tells us when the chief priest complained about the sign and wanted it changed to simply say that Yeshua claimed to be the King of the Jews, Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." And it reads like this: Then said the chief priest to the Jews, to Pilate, "Write not the King of the Jews, but that he said, I am the King of the Jews." Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." Pilate is obviously still in a personal struggle. I would love to know the conversation that went on between Pilate and Joseph Arimathea when that devout follower of Yeshua went to Pilate for the body of Yeshua. It would have been interesting to hear the conversations that went on between Pilate and his wife once the stories about Yeshua's resurrection began to circulate Jerusalem. We do not know what eventually happened to Pilate. All kinds of traditions and legends exist. The Coptic Egyptian Church is said to observe June 25th as a day of honoring Pilate as a saint and martyr. The Greek Church honors Pilate's wife as a saint. Eusebius' story is more likely. He says that Pilate was banished to the city of Vienna in Gaul, France, where he eventually committed suicide. We do know from the historian Josephus that Pilate eventually lost the position he tried to so desperately to retain at the trial of Yeshua. In 30 AD, Pilate was called to Rome to answer complaints brought against him, and his governorship ended. What did Pilate compromise by him? A few short years of luxury, and then he lost it all anyways. What will a man give in exchange for his soul? What mistakes did Pilate make? Well, he valued the wrong things. He valued temporary comfort and power over the kingdom of heaven and eternity. He feared the wrong things. The fear of man brings a snare. Pilate knew that his past behavior would not hold up under the scrutiny of Rome. He was intimidated by the Jewish leaders' threat to accuse him of disloyalty to Caesar. The fear of Yahweh is the beginning of wisdom. Although Pilate had a conscience and a certain fear of doing wrong, his fear of man was stronger than his fear of Yahweh. Yeshua said in Matthew 10, verse 28, "And fear not them which kill this body, but are not able to kill the soul, but rather fear him which is able to destroy both your soul and your body." He failed to heed Yahweh's warning. Yahweh mercifully sent a dream to Pilate's wife. And guys, if Yahweh speaks to your wife, listen to her. Pilate was not turned by the supernatural warning, even though it came from someone who he trusted. He failed to take a firm stand for what he knew was right. He was double-minded. He was torn between two directions. On the one hand, he wanted to do the right thing, but more than that, he was unwilling to risk his personal desires to do it. This is the truth we must learn from Pilate's error. A little compromise leads to more compromise. A half-hearted stand for what is right will usually crumble under the pressures of temptation. Make a firm decision to do the right thing and then do not play with the alternatives. Do not try some slick compromise like Pilate did when he offered the choice between Barabbas and Yeshua, or when he flogged Yeshua. Do not avoid the decisions. Make the decision to do the right thing and trust Yahweh with the outcome. Follow Daniel, not Pilate. Take your stand the way the 3 Hebrew children did and let Yahweh take care of the rest. Are you faced with any kind of moral struggle? Ask Yahweh to give you the courage to do the right thing. Listen to his voice. Allow him to address your conscience with truth. Hear the warnings and counsel he may give you from his word, or even through dreams and visions. Decide right here and right now that there will be no compromise. There will be no vacillating. There will simply be the commitment to do the right thing and let Yahweh take care of the rest. Yahweh did not let Yeshua go through all that suffering so you could sin as you please. Remember, 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 9. Know you not that the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of Yahweh? Be not deceived. Neither fornicators, nor adulterers, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor abusers of themselves with mankind, nor thieves, nor covetousness, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners shall inherit the kingdom of Yahweh. You believe the Bible is true? Is that just a suggestion? Either it's true or it's not. And you're wasting your time. I believe it's true. I believe that's Yahweh's word. May Yahweh bless you with the strength to do the right thing. And I'll see you in his kingdom.